America, my name is Osei-Frimpong. And let me tell you, Vivek Ramaswamy and Elon Musk have launched a war against, depending on who you talk to, a war against America in defense of America, right? So we have two different national ideals at war. And this is good because usually these are fought through using black people as proxies. But since it's about the tech sector, there aren't enough black people in the tech sector to act as proxies. So it's kind of a mask-off moment between an open war between recent Asian immigrants, the H-1B post-1965 immigration crowd, and the ultra-nationalist, ethnic nationalist white American crowd about what America is, right? So the story we've told ourselves about America is that it's a meritocracy, and the best and brightest in America get to take advantage of America's institutions and then rule over their lessers. And that was a very good argument for everyone except the black people who were at the beginning of the argument, when this argument was launched and was so persuasive, were so far behind in terms of material access and overdetermined in terms of policing their culture that they couldn't compete. So you got your white ethnic nationalism along with your meritocracy, and it used meritocracy as a strategy. In the same way, depending on who you talk to, Israelis use the Holocaust as a strategy. Americans used meritocracy as a strategy to legitimize degrading black people. And that was effective. And that was effective and popular for everyone except black people, but we were so far behind it didn't really matter. Until we made that meritocracy, the nation of laws, such a fertile ground for recent immigrants from East Asia and Southeast Asia to then survive and thrive by the rules and the rhetoric of legitimacy of rules that was established in order to suppress black self-determination. So we made this nation a nation of laws, and black people did contribute to making this nation a nation of laws through the civil rights movement. So we're a nation of laws. And then people who are very good at winning within the laws moved here and then beat everybody at the laws, right? So I've seen this fight. I'm from California, so I've seen this fight for the last 25 years, except usually they use black people and Latinos as a proxy, but it's really always been about whites and Asians. And, there are different salvos, different communities face. In some neighborhoods, they've just retreated. Like there's an earnest retreat from the Bay Area, California, from San Jose to like Atherton. There's the whites have just retreated, and there's a retreat going on in Johns Creek in Atlanta, outside of Atlanta, to different whiter suburbs because the whites can't compete by their own rules. And usually if they can, when the whites can't compete by their own rules, they try to find a way to surreptitiously change the rules, because they use the idea of a rule of law in order to keep out black people from justice claims. And then when they can't win by their own rules, they have to try to surreptitiously change the rules, but that's hard to do in an internet world. All right. So, in a social media world where it's all kind of public and out there. All right, so what we have is a Euthyphro problem insofar as in the Euthyphro dialogue, there's a section where Socrates asks, or the question comes, is it good because the gods like it, or do the gods like it because it's good? Right? And in America, that looks like, are Americans the best because what we do in America, or are you an American because you're the best? Right? Are Americans the best because the best people are made in America, or are Americans the best because if you're the best wherever you are in the world, you are also de facto an American and you are welcome in America? So pretty much the top tier of every nation in the world is also an American. So American's not a nationality as you know it. It is more of a grade for being the best, right? And here is where we just happen to congregate in the U.S. But for the most part, every person who is the best in the world is de facto American. Or are you American because of what we do in America? We've made you the best. And so that's the problem. Are Americans the best because everyone who's the best is American? Like, is de facto American, even if they don't happen to have American citizenship? Or are Americans the best because we make or we choose or we love Americans and we make them the best? And until we actually work that out, this is always going to be a bit of a rub. This is always going to be a bit of a rub. Because the people who say that Americans are best because the best are de facto Americans want the elite who happen to be born from other places to come to America and then, kick up our GDP by being the best. And then we'll find a way to pay off all of the other people who happen to be Americans. All of the not deadweight Americans, but the ones who happen to be Americans but aren't necessarily the best. We can pay them off. We call it a UBI. We can call it something else. But for the most part, the American identity is being the best, and that means we need to look at the best from everywhere and call them American. Not because we necessarily make the best through our institutions at home. So that is the rub. And for the first time, like I said, this proxy fight is fought in tech. I remember this a little bit in the 80s with Japan, but for the first fight, this proxy fight is fought in tech, and there aren't even enough black people to serve as proxies. So this is nakedly like East Asian and Asian recent immigrants, the post-1965 Immigration Act crowd, versus the white ethnic nationalists who think that, well, they're the best just because they're American. And it's their values and not necessarily the values in the apple pie and the football. All of that is what goes into making America, not necessarily scoring the best on our meritocratic tests. Meritocratic tests. Right? So when DEI was trained at black people, both MAGA sides, tech MAGA, make America great by making it a meritocracy again, although it was never a meritocracy. It was always an ethno-state. The meritocracy was a strategy, versus make America great by making it an ethno-state, a naked ethno-state again. Those two were both aligned insofar as they could both just agree that black people just need to shut up and sweep things. And they're culturally deficient. Now, when we unpack that cultural deficiency, the ethnic Americans, the white ethnic Americans, will say that actually these Eastern Asian and Southeast Asian immigrants are culturally deficient insofar as they're not really American. They're not Protestant. They don't care about family in the same way. They care about family a different way. They train their kids to beat our kids, and we don't like that. And that is, they're not culturally of us. And then the Eastern Asian and the Southeast Asian Americans will say, like, actually, we are just better at being American than you are, as shown by our test scores on tests that you designed. Right? You designed this. You designed the standards of merit, and we are better at training our kids for it. So you should listen to us about how to be better Americans, because you guys are culturally deficient. And, the whites don't like it when you call them culturally deficient. Now, I've been telling you for a while that liberal Americans are the worst parents in the United States. But Vivek wasn't even as specific as I am. He just thinks that, like he lumps the conservatives in there too, right? They're just bad at parenting. Because they don't produce kids who score as well as the East Asian and the Southeast Asian kids. And so that's the argument he's making, and he's saying that obviously we are better Americans because we score better on the meritocratic tests that Americans designed in order to determine who's the best American. Like, we beat you on your own tests. So obviously we're better at it. And you can learn something from this, is what Vivek Ramaswamy is telling you. You could learn something from us. The whites do not like that. They do not like being called culturally deficient. Although it is empirically attested that, by whether you look at the median incomes of Southeast Asians or the test scores, they are better at being Americans than, white Americans. So you have to say that maybe they are culturally superior if that's what your culture is. And maybe like white Americans could learn from them if that's what your culture is. Now, there's going to be a few different problems, because in the same way that the Ivy Leagues graduates disproportionately go into finance, because these are industries that earn, concern, and attract money. And if you're just around that kind of money, especially if it's scalable, some of it will come down to you. It doesn't mean that you're necessarily the best or the brightest just because you're richest. You've just gone into industries that earn, concern, and attract money, so that you'll make money because of your proximity to money. And so we need to actually make sure that our best and brightest don't go into finance. They go into something else, right? So that's kind of the same thing with engineering versus non-engineering careers. It's not necessarily that they're the best and brightest. They're not necessarily the best and brightest, but they're going into scalable industries where there's going to be more money like swirling around, right? So this idea that the best and brightest will necessarily be the richest is a little bit of a confusion. So just because you see people going into industries that make money doesn't mean that you should necessarily go into those industries. Although I don't want you to go into finance necessarily. I wouldn't mind you going into tech. I think there need to be more black engineers for a few different reasons. But don't be distracted by the fact that obviously this is what you should do because this is where the money is. Sometimes the money's in bad places. Right. So the question is, what is America? Is America the best, which means everywhere you find the best people, they are de facto Americans and they should just be able to come over? Or is America the best because we make the best here in America through our own institutions? And if we're not doing that, we need to fix our institutions and actually talk about how our institutions aren't doing what they could be doing. Right. And so that is a productive discussion to have. Now, J.D. Vance is in a peculiar position in order to actually make this discussion, to make this argument, because depending on how you read Hillbilly Elegy, the book is about, American culture, the hillbilly culture is kind of garbage, lovable garbage, but it's full of violent degenerates. And, my wife's family culture is a lot better. So we need to change color, but we need to change culture, but we don't need to go outside of America in order to fix American cultural institutions. That's going to be the synthesis. Unfortunately, it's a synthesis that I think the right is better poised to make. That American culture is not great, but we don't need to go outside of American culture and bring in other non-Americans to fix it. We need to fix our cultural institution. So why did this dude's folks come here? Because this is where you can make the money. Right? So Saga and Chetty, posted, and, we go back and forth about this, about how those conformist countries that just are very good at taking the test are kind of stifling creatively. So they come here because you could actually both excel through given rules and have the creativity to try out new things in a way that you can't in a more traditional culture. So that's why a lot of people come here. That is a bit true, but there needs to be a little bit. I think there needs to be a little bit more nuance in that discussion. I think they come here to make a buck. I think they come here to make a buck. And if you make a buck independently of your home culture, you don't have baggage telling you how to spend that buck. And and you could spend, and that's like one of the virtues of capitalism. Nobody can tell you what to do with your money. And you could use your money to run other people. So yeah, it becomes a what you call it, an arms race. Yeah, and I've said this before in the patriotism video. I've said this before. It's just now it's a direct conflict between Indian Americans and East Asian Americans telling white Americans that you're culturally deficient. You are culturally deficient. This is why we beat you, and we will continue to beat you. Until you either fix your culture. Although if you don't fix your culture, that's fine. We will just get people who are not culturally deficient and bring them over here and call them Americans, because they're the real Americans anyway, because what it is to be an American is to be the best. And we don't grow the best homegrown. We grow the best in, Calcutta or whatever. So we'll get those people who are really Americans because they're the best, and we'll just officially call them Americans as we bring them over here. Right? So that is, like I said, the Euthyphro problem, where is it good because God loves it, or does God love it because it's good? Are Americans produced here because we produce Americans, or are Americans the best and we just call everything that's the best American? Right? But to be an American was never about being the best. It was actually about like thinking through democracy in a certain way. We just confused that because calling it being the best was a great strategy to design tests and design measures in order to kick black people down and legitimize subordination of them. Now, there are some deficient aspects of American culture that we need to fix. And not just the racial nationalist aspects of American culture that we need to fix, but also just like a quality of anti-intellectualism that we need to fix, an unseriousness, even about art, not just about finance and industry, but just a quality of unseriousness about the meaning of freedom that can be realized in art. And let me just end with talking about art for a little bit, because one of the reasons why we don't want to be a nation of test takers who are not necessarily good at thinking about rules, but instead thinking about how to follow the rules as they are given, who are not necessarily creative, is that we might get confused about what freedom means. But one of the issues that goes along with being American is thinking through freedom. Is thinking through what freedom means. And art, in a way that other things can't, helps you think through. This is art, not just, music and plays, but art in general. It helps you actually realize and think through what freedom means. And if you don't understand art, or you can't produce it as a realization of freedom, you're going to have a stultified culture in terms of like turning your creativity, turning your money into meaning. Right? So I do worry about the degradation of art by the money elite, because that'll be a degradation of freedom. I also worry about the degradation of art by the crass poor, because that's also a degradation of freedom. So just keep that in mind. We don't want everyone to be a tech industrialist or a tech or a finance bro, because they might actually confuse us about what art means. And if you're confused about what art means, or what freedom means, and if you're confused about what freedom means, you're going to be kind of confused about what art is and that relationship to meaning in life. First of all, I can't, and this is also realized even in Tesla's design, I can't be the only one who doesn't find Teslas the most aesthetically appealing cars in the world. I find them brutish and not beautiful. I haven't ever driven in one. I've just looked at one. I'm sure the driving experience is something special, but I find it soul destroying. I look at the design of a Tesla and I find it soul destroying. I'm not. Yeah, they look like Soviet vehicles. Like they don't even look like Soviet vehicles. They look like a caricature of Soviet vehicles, which makes me which I find bizarre. They are not beautiful. So, yeah, they're designed by engineers, not designers, which is why we don't want a nation full of engineers necessarily. They call it minimalist, but you can have minimalist. It's unbeautiful. But I think the Elon Musks of the world think that they're beautiful because they don't have really good taste. And that's part of the problem. That's part of the problem, right? So there needs to be varieties of there needs to be a kind of a variety of like technological expression and intellectual expression that is realized in art and in kind of like the way we live our lives in architecture and other ways. But let me recap real quickly. The Euthyphro problem is the idea, the way the Euthyphro problem maps on to the American problem is that we don't know what American is. Are we the best because we make the best in America through our own like internal process, or are we the best because everything that is the best, whether it's in America or not, is de facto American? Right? So you might not know this, but as soon as you create something great in some other country, you are an unofficial American. This is how we got so many Nazi scientists. Like after World War II, they were de facto Americans because they were the best at science. And so we have to understand what that means if you have an idea of America that just is attached to it being the best, because those best might not be homegrown with American values and American institutions or have any loyalty to America. If you think that Elon Musk is necessarily loyal to America, we're going to find out in 10 years that he might just get tired of America because America is the one who turned his son into his daughter and like then give tariffs, and he might just, go buy a whole nation someplace else. He might get tired of America. So like, is he really loyal to America in a deep way? And that's a question you have to ask, say, the ethno-nationalist Americans. Are they really loyal to America in a deep way if, for example, they don't really respect black people's claim to reparations or like foundational Americans' understanding of America? Because you're not going to find, depending on how you define America, you're not going to find a more American people than black Americans. Not just because we disproportionately been fighting in all of America's wars, but because we actually have been fighting for democratic ideals when, white people were casual with the Klan, right? So how you define America, there's a lot at stake in that decision. And Elon Musk might define America differently than the right populists who will define America differently than like late King or Cornel West, or even I'll define America as like a nation state. Right. So thank you for your time. If you appreciate what I'm doing, which I think you should, because you're not going to find the arguments everywhere, you should go to www.funkyacademic.com, kick in $5, $15, or $50 a month, just because you support someone saying like, that is kind of a Euthyphro argument where Euthyphro and Socrates were trying to figure out whether it's good because God loves it or does God love it because it's good. And we have to figure out in America, is it good because we've made it in America, or is it American and good? Is it American because it's good, whether it's made someplace else? Because we identify goodness in America and we have to ask ourselves, like I said, is it American? Is it good and American because it's made here, or is it good and American because it's good? Is it American because it's good? Is it good because it's American, or is it American because it's good? And we have to like kind of, think about what that means, right? And we have to think about, are we just going to give every excellence all across this wide world an American identity? So as soon as you become excellent, you're also an American. Is that the kind of America we want? Or we want an America that makes excellence because of our homegrown culture? And that means we need to adjust our culture that makes excellence, because right now it's not one. It's not one in a routine way. So thank you. And I will see you about something else.